Welcome to the Living the Dream podcast with Curveball. If you believe, you can achieve. Welcome to the Living the Dream with Curveball podcast, a show where I interview guests that teach, motivate, and inspire. Today, I am joined by author, transformationalist, audiobook coach, and producer, Robert A. Lane. Robert founded Robert Lane Coaching in 2020. He spent 30 plus years in the entertainment industry. Now he's a life and career coach, and he focuses on helping nonfiction authors get their audiobook out there. So, Robert, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and just excited to chat with you today.
Why don't you start off by telling everybody a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, let me go back a little bit. My background is I worked 30 plus years in the entertainment industry. And when I left the business, that's when I started Robert Lane Coaching. It was a great opportunity to reinvent myself and kind of start from scratch. So that's how the Robert Lane Coaching started. And I did start off as a career coach slash life coach. And from there, that did lead to the book that I published, which is called Lights Action You. And from that, of course, I did the audiobook version of that. My background, I do a lot of audio work. And plus, I mean, I've done a variety of different types of jobs in the entertainment business, from, on camera, off camera, production, corporate, of course, working in the corporate world. But I do a lot of audio, so it just made sense for me to turn my book into an audiobook. And after I did that, I had other authors approaching me saying, I'd love to have help on how to turn my book into an audiobook. So I expanded Robert Lane Coaching to create an audiobook coaching program to help nonfiction authors through the entire process of creating an audiobook, the fine art of narration, how to be engaging and compelling, and then help them get published on Audible, Amazon, and Apple Books, those being the most popular distribution platforms for authors. And of course, if there are any other distribution platforms that they wanted to be on, I'd help them get published there as well. But that's kind of the short version of where I am today.
Well, talk about some of the 30 plus years of your entertainment career, kind of tell us why you got into it and what you were doing.
Yeah, would love to. When I started off in the entertainment business, I started off in radio. So I was already, attracted to the audio world. And I hosted talk shows and music shows and did audio production. And matter of fact, I even hosted a jazz radio show, which I love doing. This was in Los Angeles, and that actually grew into getting involved with the Los Angeles Jazz Society, and had a great opportunity to interview some fabulous jazz musicians, which was just a wonderful thing. I really loved doing that. And then as my career continued on, I eventually got a job as an audio engineer for Playboy Radio, of all places. They had a radio show that was on XM radio. This was back in the day before Sirius XM even existed. Sirius didn't exist yet, so it was just XM radio. And so I was the audio engineer for their radio show there. And then again, we talk about the ebbs and flows of our life and our business. And when my time ended at Playboy, it was because they didn't want to, I was an independent contractor and they didn't want to pay the money. So they let me go. the day before Thanksgiving. And so I was out of a job. So I had to figure out what was I going to do. So I eventually went back to study audio engineering to just gain more skills, which led to doing an internship at a couple of places in Hollywood. And one place was in Burbank, where I learned more post production skills and how to utilize some of the programs like Pro Tools and things of that nature that are industry standard. And then I got a job at a post house in Hollywood, which eventually led to a job at 20th Century Fox, working at the studio on the studio lot in Los Angeles. And I spent, oh geez, I would say about my last 14 years of working in the business was spent at Fox. And while I was over there, I was a feature project manager, so I oversaw the all their features, the current features, their catalog, as we were at that time converting all their movies into digital files, as streaming, of course, became a thing. And so what I did was manage all those projects to create audio files for the Netflixes of the world, and we had to do movies not only in English but in multiple languages, and then send those files out to all bunch of different vendors and distributors, and like I say, like the Netflixes of the world. So then, from that moment, Disney had cut a deal with Fox, where Disney was buying Fox, and that had impacted the department that I worked in very much so. So either they kept you and you worked for Disney, or they let you go and you got a severance package and you were done. So I was actually on the first round of firings. So I knew that I would be making another career change. So it was obviously a blessing in disguise. And I mentioned this because we all go through these, as I mentioned, ebbs and flows in our life and our career. And what may seem like something that that shuts the door is really just moving something aside for something better to open up. And that's the way I looked at it. I knew I didn't want to go back to the corporate world. So I thought about, what can I do that I would feel more fulfilled, and that I can do something that can help other people as well. And so that's when I decided to create Robert Lane Coaching from scratch, and study and take all my experience in the career that I had, and become a career coach and life coach, so that I can help other people being able to navigate through any type of work environment and still love their job and love what they do, and and be able to handle any tough situations. So that's where Robert Lane Coaching started. And like I mentioned earlier, that did lead to the book that I wrote. It's called Lights Action You. And the book is actually a collection of experiences and stories from working in the entertainment business. But with each story, I wanted to give something of value. So every story has a tool or a technique or a lesson that I would teach in the career coaching aspect, so that people can be entertained with the story, but then they can also get some value out of it as well. And then, of course, that did lead to creating the audiobook coaching program that I teach now, to help authors narrate their own audiobook. So, being an entrepreneur, of course, is a very hard profession, because you are the CEO of you. So you're the boss, and the decisions that you make, good or bad, the buck stops with you. So, if you try something and it fails, you just have to learn from that lesson and figure out another way to accomplish the goals that you want to accomplish. Never give up is something that I always tell people. Never give up, because you never know when you will come across that one thing that will allow you to reach all the goals that you've set for yourself.
Well, why do you feel as if nonfiction authors should narrate their own books?
That is a great question. Nonfiction authors, and I'm a firm believer that all nonfiction authors need to narrate their own audiobook because it's their story. A lot of the authors that I work with are have written books more like memoirs and experiences and things that they've gone through and incredible events that they were able to overcome and change their life for the better. And so it's very personal. And a nonfiction author telling their story, there's nobody on the planet that can tell their story better than them because they lived it, they've breathed it. This is their life story. There was a, there was a core reason of why they needed to write this book in the first place, and it even applies to entrepreneurs or excuse me, or coaches or educators or people of that nature who have something to offer. It's so important for the author to tell their story in their own voice, because even if you had another narrator, for example, if I would have loved to had Morgan Freeman narrate my book. He would have been awesome. Such a great voice. Love his voice. But again, it's still Morgan Freeman's interpretation. It wouldn't be my interpretation. So no matter how great a narrator is, it being their interpretation may not be what the author would interpret or how the author would tell it. There's certain subtleties and nuances of how the author speaks, and maybe concepts that they wouldn't express it in the way that the narrator did. It's like, well, I wouldn't say it that way. I would say it this way. So that's why it's just so important to preserve the integrity of the author's story by having them narrate their own audiobook.
So talk about the two main important audio components that you need to create a compelling audiobook.
Let's take a quick break.
Okay, everybody, it's Michael E. Cullen II.
And I'm Sesame and Carta from the All Too Real 2 podcast. We're passionate about movies, TV, and pretty much all things pop culture.
Dive into the chaos of failed sitcoms, direct-to-video sequels, and the quirky realms of cinema and TV.
Join us every Thursday for your dose of All Too Real 2 entertainment.
We'll guide you through debates like whether Howard the Duck qualifies as a superhero.
Ponder if Larry the Cable Guy could be the new Rock or Schwarzenegger.
Discover if some shows and movies should have stayed in the cutting room.
Ever heard of a sitcom featuring that dictator with the funny mustache? Well, we watched it.
We're dedicated to unraveling the peculiarities of pop culture, sometimes with awesome guests.
So, if you're into the eccentric world of pop culture,
listen and subscribe to All Too Real 2.
Available wherever you find podcasts
and on Age of Radio.
Well, there are two factors. There's the practical aspect, and then there's the intangibles. Now, the practical aspect of narrating your own audiobook would be mic placement, making sure your levels are consistent, body posture, being hydrated, keeping your voice healthy, keeping your body, actually just staying healthy is really something that you need to do. So there's that aspect of it. And then what I feel is even more important is the intangibles. And what the intangibles are what the author brings to the table, which is their emotion, their energy. Again, tapping into the core reason of why they wrote this book in the first place, because they're going to bring their voice, which is already in their written word, they're going to bring it to life in their own voice, but really being conversational. And probably the most important aspect is being your authentic self, telling your story in your own voice, not trying to sound like somebody else, not trying to act like somebody else. You want to be you, because when you are authentic, that's what allows you to stand out in the crowd. If you're, for example, maybe you are a relationship coach or a weight loss coach, and you've written a book, and there's 30 or 40 books out there, let's say audiobooks. And by you narrating your own book, you're going to stand out because no one can express yourself better than you. So that is such an important component, the intangibles. But again, the practical aspects, of course, are important, but the intangibles are just as important.
What's the best place for those trying to distribute their audiobooks to be distributed them at?
That's another great question. Audiobook distribution is really important. I focus in my audiobook coaching program to help authors get published on Audible, Amazon, and Apple. I call it the AAA. You have to be on Audible, Amazon, and Apple. Reason being is that most people know what Audible is. Most people get their audiobooks from Audible. So it really is important for the author to be distributed on that platform. So Audible, Amazon, and Apple are the three that you definitely need to be on. So when I speak with authors before I enroll anybody, I want to talk with them and find out more about their book and what their goals are, maybe their marketing strategies are, because that is a factor in regards to distribution. Now, of course, I'll get them on Audible, Amazon, and Apple, but if they are distributing their book and it's very successful and maybe it's on Barnes and Noble, or maybe it's on, there's at least 40 other distribution platforms. If one of those other platforms are working well for them, then I, of course, encourage them to make sure that their audiobook is also on those distribution platforms as well. But this is something that we talk about, before they go through the program, so that there's a clear vision and a clear path as to what's going to work best for the author. But again, Audible, Amazon, and Apple really are non-negotiables in a sense when it comes to distribution, because again, the general public goes there first.
So what kind of speaking experience does a person need to be able to narrate an audiobook?
There are some authors who have done speaking engagements, and so they have a little bit of experience, though they have found out that when you do a speaking engagement, that's one thing, but when you're recording an audiobook, it really is like a whole other experience. And I remember I had an author who was like, oh, I do speaking all the time. This will be a piece of cake. And then she realized, she's like, wow, this is a whole other beast. This is like a whole different thing. And it's just a different mindset. But I encourage authors to not worry about whether they have a ton of speaking experience or not, because as a coach, that's part of what I help them in regards to being able to do a great narration. You don't have to have tons of speaking experience. Matter of fact, the first lesson that I go over with authors is a mindset lesson, because that's where it starts. It starts with being focused, being grounded, being in the present moment, not allowing you to worry about the past or the future, really being in the present moment. But more importantly, because I come across this quite a bit with a lot of authors, and that is, they don't like their voice, or they don't think they have what it takes, or they hate how they sound. And that's a false belief that we need to crush, because your voice is great. You should love and embrace your voice. And we talk about this, and we do exercises to build confidence, because that is a key factor. Love and embrace this wonderful sound that comes out of your body, because that's part of who you are. And that's part of what makes you so unique. Your voice, it's not only just your written word, but how you speak, how you express yourself. Curtis, your author brand is everything that encompasses who you are, because you are a brand. If you've written a book and you've published your book, you're an entrepreneur. You really are. And you should love and embrace your author brand, because the way you were brought up, your sense of humor, your personality, your belief systems, your morals and values, everything that encompasses who you are, and your voice, of course, that's what creates your author brand. And that's, again, what makes you so unique. So loving and embracing this wonderful voice that you have is so crucial and so important. And that will allow you to do a great narration. It really just comes down to that. So you don't have to have years of professional speaking experience to narrate a great audiobook.
Well, about how long does it take to produce an audiobook?
Well, the program that I have is designed for 6 weeks. So there's basically 3 phases. The first phase is setup and preparation. And then the second phase is where we do a really deep dive into how to do a great audiobook narration. And then after that, you have to have your audiobook edited and cleaned up. All your audio files need to be cleaned. And that's where, my coaching hat comes off and the editing hat comes on. And as the author is recording their audio files, they send them to me and I do all the audio post-production work on it, because you have to make sure that your audio files meet the exact specifications for publication. And I've seen it happen where authors have gone to a studio, but their audiobook didn't meet the specs that were required for publication. And I've seen authors get rejected from Audible, Amazon, and Apple. And we don't want that to happen. So I make sure that their audio files are in tip-top shape. And then we talk about other marketing strategies. But you can really get this done in 6 weeks. You really can. So that's the timeline. Now, of course, I understand that life happens, and sometimes I've had authors who travel a lot, so it may take a little bit longer, but that's okay, because I don't, as long as you're doing the work, I will work with you until your audiobook is published. So.
Tell us about any upcoming projects that you're working on that listeners need to be aware of.
I just finished a book that just got published, and it's an incredible book that this author talks about how she was pulled into a cult and how she was able to get out and change her life around. It's an incredible story. I have another author who shares her journey with being diagnosed with breast cancer, and how she was able to overcome this disease, and now she lives a healthy life, and she shares her experience with other not authors, but like other cancer patients. So it's a great thing to see when authors take their book, and then after they do their audiobook, they're out there doing speaking engagements, and they're helping other people and sharing their story and inspiring others. That's such a wonderful thing. Such a wonderful thing.
Go at your contact info. So, if somebody's out there wanting to get their book published, audiobook, they can do so.
Yeah, so I would love to speak to any author, and the reason why I work with nonfiction authors is because, again, it's your story. No one can tell your story better than you. In regards to fiction, it depends on how the story is written. I mean, if you have a space fantasy story with a whole bunch of different characters, and you have different accents and dialects, and and you really want to bring that book to life, then hire a professional voiceover artist who can do voices, who can make characters come to life. So that's why I don't really do fiction, because I want the author to narrate their own book, and usually nonfiction is the category that it falls into. But if you are a nonfiction author, or even if you are a fiction author and you've written a book that's more of like a memoir style, you can still narrate it. By all means, I would love to speak with you. And you can just go to robertlanecoaching.com. That's my website. It tells you more about the audiobook coaching program. And the first step is just to book a call with me. There's plenty of places where it says book a call. You just click the button. It goes directly to my calendar. You will speak with me directly, and you will work with me directly. And I just feel it's really important that we have a conversation, because we're going to be working together. And I want to make sure that I resonate with you and that you resonate with me. And if you're ready to go, we'll get you enrolled. And 6 weeks later, guess what? You have a great audiobook that's ready for publication.
All right. Close us out with some final thoughts. Maybe if there was something I forgot to talk about that you would like to touch on, or any final thoughts you have for the listeners.
I would say be your authentic self. Love who you are, embrace who you are, and just be you, because nobody can be you better than you. You are unique. So embrace your uniqueness. And you do have talent and you do have skills, no matter what they are. Love what you do and be passionate about what you do. And don't be afraid to help other people and to share some joy, because there's never enough of that out in the world. So always tell everybody, be good humans.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, robertlanecoaching.com. I know some of my listeners out there want to get an audiobook, completed. So contact Robert for that information. Jump on your favorite podcast app, follow, rate, review, share the episode to as many people as possible. If you have any guest or suggestion topics, Curtis Jackson 1978 at att.net is the place to send them. Thank you for listening and supporting the show. Robert, thank you for all that you do, and thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you so much, Curtis.
For more information on the Living the Dream podcast, visit www.djcurveball.com. Until next time, stay focused on living the dream.